Gary Koss says in his fall newsletter, I'm going to quote here. I'm going to be quoting it frequently this hour, and I'm going to turn it over here to Gary in a moment, but I want to quote from his newsletter, and then I want to also bring on my co-host, Eric Barger. But Gary says this. He says, "This year has been a very active time for those in high places pursuing a new world order. Their agenda gained steady momentum throughout the spring and summer, with proponents hoping to use the 70th session of the United Nations General Assembly as a springboard to larger one world events later this year and beyond. Two men in particular," and folks, we're going to talk about these two men for this hour. He says, "Two men in particular have appeared repeatedly on the global stage as strange bedfellows with a seemingly common vision, and that would be Francis, the first pope to have come directly from the Jesuit order, has been cooperating closely with President Barack Obama on numerous fronts which are shaping the emerging order. These areas of agreement include, but are not limited to, the following: 1. The pursuit of Mideast policies which are detrimental toward Israel. 2. The promotion of the UN climate change agenda. And 3. The support of LGBT rights and goals." And Eric, thank you for joining me this hour. And I know you read the same article. Your thoughts before we get right into Gary's comments?
Well, the article is a terrific article. I encourage folks to go get it. We are going to highlight things from it, but it's very well done. And it does really lay out in really plain terms exactly what's happening, especially what we can make out of what happened in the Pope's visit. He was treated like more than the Pope, I think, during the visit. So the starstruck nature of the way the media portrayed this thing to us, we need to dig through that and really get down to what the core is.
We'll get to these other issues as well. Gary Koss, welcome back to the program. Glad to have you.
It's always good to be with you, Jan, and hi, Eric, as well.
Gary, here's another quote from you. You say this, and we'll give some reference and where folks can look this up, but you say, "Make no mistake, this is a very wicked agenda. I personally believe that their alliance," and that means the Pope and Barack Obama, "and joint goals are intentional. Both of these men are deceived and, whether they realize it or not, are being used to usher in the end-time world order described in Revelation 13. In other words, Gary, they're being used to usher in global government. You and I and Eric talked back in late July. Let me ask you this. Have you then seen a greater rush forward here in the months between since you and I and Eric talked in late July?
Yes, the month of September and also October thus far has been a real, you used the words earlier, a rush forward. Now we're truly rushing forward. I mean, this has been in motion for a long, long time, the groundwork being laid, but now things are really rushing forward. The meetings at the UN and also the Pope taking the opportunity of being here in the United States for the UN meetings, his address before Congress and meetings with Barack Obama and the media coverage of it, and especially the promoting of the climate change agenda and having the Pope and our president fully on board is really causing things to gel now. People, even in the secular media who are more conservative, they're going to have a difficult go the rest of the way speaking out against the climate change agenda because there's a lot of money behind it, a great deal of push worldwide, and most of the other countries of the world are already on board. And so anybody opposing this is going to appear as if they really don't want world peace and they don't want to save the planet. So we're going to be painted as the bad guys. The secular media is not going to tell people what this is really all about and where it's headed, unfortunately.
Well, they're using, and I've said this for about a decade now, they're using this global warming / climate change. The ultimate agenda of this is one world. I mean, pollution knows no borders, so let's have no borders. But this seems to be the single issue being tapped into to create a one world system. I never ever would have thought that when I began studying these things 30 years ago. Eric, would you have thought of this?
The idea that climate change or sustainable development, which all gets wrapped together here, I mean, this touches every part of our lives. Gary points that out in the article, and that's something I've been on to a little bit. But really, honestly, Gary is the one who really woke me up to these things many, many years ago. And since then, I've been able to kind of view things through that prism, and it's really helped me to keep track of things as they go along. But one thing that we've already said is it is speeding up, just like the birth pangs. The speed up for this thing to take place, for the world government to take place, and the agenda of those who want to do it, and their popularity tells us, it could very well happen. We don't know how soon, but the speeding up of it is something that's really struck me recently.
I want to quote from you again, Gary, and this is in this article that we're referring to in your fall newsletter. And here you say, "Isn't it interesting that Pope Francis and Barack Hussein Obama have become the world's most visible players when it comes to shaping the most important issues we face, from Mideast policy to the environment, same-sex marriage, race relations, interfaithism? These two men, with the backing of a litany of godless political advisors and promoters, are pursuing their agenda for global unification with little resistance." Then you say, "Islam and every other false religion promoting anti-Christian principles is getting a free pass from the media. Meanwhile, public opinion is being intentionally mobilized against Christians and conservative Jews." And here's the thing that I find interesting, Gary, and that is the Pope was and continues to be hyped by the media. And this is a media that hates religion, and yet this media is hyped this Pope more than anything I've ever seen.
No, I agree. It's almost as if Pope Francis can do no wrong as far as the media is concerned. He's being portrayed as the chief spokesperson for the planet. And I know I mentioned to you the other day when we were talking, Jan, if a conservative Christian leader presents an opposing view, he's ostracized by these people in the secular media, but yet the Pope is applauded. And so we really have a reason to ask why this Pope, who is supposed to be the Christian leader of the world, at least that's how he's being promoted. He's admired and presented as virtually infallible, yet by the same media, Bible-believing evangelical leaders are treated with disdain and contempt. Everybody should be asking why that's the case. Could it be that it's because they all share the Pope's vision for a new world order? And if they do, they would then see true Christians and conservative Jews as standing in their way. And I think that's what's happening here. You've got lines being drawn, people taking sides, and they realize who their leading figures are. And so again, it's very interesting that both Barack Obama as well as Pope Francis and a few others are being held up as being the spokespeople for the future of the planet. And I find that extremely interesting. I just came across something since we spoke. It was actually an article posted by WorldNet Daily, and the title of it is "Meet the Pope's Bilderberger Guru," written by Jerome Corsi. And it just plays into what I wrote in my article, and I came across this just very recently, and it talks about a man by the name of Peter Sutherland, who's a top advisor to the Pope, arguably the Pope's closest advisor, and he's a non-executive chairman of the investment banking powerhouse Goldman Sachs, who served also as a chairman of the oil giant British Petroleum through 2009. Then he was later appointed to the steering committee of the Bilderberger Group and served as the honorary chairman of the Trilateral Commission. He's also in the Knights of Malta and a member of Opus Dei. The bottom line here is he has the Pope's ear, and he is a globalist through and through. He's even been the Pope's main advisor to the new Vatican Bank, which, by the way, the Pope is now referring to as the administration of the patrimony of the Apostolic See. Quite a mouthful, but that's what he's referring to the Vatican Bank as. Anyway, this Sutherland character, who is occasionally interviewed in the media, Peter Sutherland, that's a name to be looking for because whatever he stands for seems to be pushed through this current Pope. And I believe there are others as well, but he's the biggest name. Sutherland and his types in the Trilateral Commission and at the UN and the Bilderberg Group, the one thing they hold in common is they have convinced themselves that the only way to save the planet is through world government. And some of them actually believe that world government is the only way to save the planet. Others, I think, are a bit more sinister in the agenda. They're doing it for strictly spiritual reasons. And I do believe there is an overt satanic element in the globalist movement. God knows where all these people are and why they're doing what they're doing. We don't always know that. We just know what they're saying. But I can tell you this, that elbows are being rubbed among these individuals, and they're pushing in the same direction, and consistently this agenda is going against Bible-believing Christians and conservative Jews.
I think I probably just want to recognize the elephant in the room. It's only because I've been getting emails about it. Every place I've gone to speak, including our conference recently back in October, Jan, in Minneapolis, people ask the question, could the Pope be the false prophet of Revelation 13? We don't know that, and we want to make that very clear that we're not saying that. However, there is going to be a religious leader that's going to be the point man for who becomes the Antichrist eventually. And you can't help but notice that this is the first time we've ever said, boy, it looks like if this Pope isn't the one, he's giving lessons. He's showing the way, or showing what can happen when somebody is adored like him and people accept what he says carte blanche, and that, of course, over 1 billion people on the planet, allegedly anyway, believe that he's speaking for God and the only spokesman for God. So, there's a lot of those things in play, and just to know that he is giving accolades to people like Dorothy Day and Thomas Merton. Dorothy Day was a Marxist, and yet she was one of 4 people he mentioned as great Americans in his speech to Congress. Thomas Merton is the father of the contemplative movement, the modern emerging contemplatives. Both of them are deceased, but he gave them high kudos. In fact, there's talk now that Dorothy Day may be sainted before too long. The Pope will push that through. So when those are the kind of people that have shaped his thinking, and he gives them the praise he did, well, all the rest of this stuff is coming together so fast, we're just following the track of where it's going.